6 years, Cecily. 6 years and not one offer. I am sorry to be the man who says it in a room with the blinds still down, but somebody must, and I would rather it were family. You are unmarriageable. There, it is not unkind. It is only a fact, like the weather. It is a fact like the weather, Osric, said the woman by the window, in that you have said it a great many times, and it has never once altered anything. Hollis Grantham, 4th Duke of Verrily, had come into the room behind the attorney and had not yet been noticed, and he stood by the door and did not announce himself, which was afterwards the first thing he was ashamed of. The parlour at Bramblewick smelled of beeswax and wet black earth off the fen. 9 people had come back from the churchyard. Miss Prudence Ward had been 81 and had been buried that morning in a hard March wind, and her nephew had been in the house 11 minutes before he began on her niece. Cecily Ward sat in a low chair by the window with her hands quiet in her lap and a crutch leaning against the sill beside her. She was 25. There was mud on the hem of her black gown, which meant she had been out on the fen that week, and there was an iron brace under it that Hollis did not know about yet, and she had the stillest face he had ever seen on a young woman in a room full of people talking about her. It would take the Duke of Verrily until the thaw to understand what he had been holding in his hands for 6 years, and the understanding would cost him the one thing he had never in his life risked. I say it out of concern, said Osric Ward. You cannot keep this house. You cannot ride, you cannot dance, you cannot pay a call above a mile off. A single woman of 25 in your condition, alone in a fen parish. I have bet 3 servants, 1100 sheets of dried plants, and a great deal of correspondence, said Cecily. I have not been alone in 6 years. I have merely been uninterrupted, which you have always found suspicious. If we might come to the will, said Mr. Truscott. It was short, and Miss Prudence Ward had plainly enjoyed writing it. To my niece Cecily Ward, the house and lands of Bramblewick, with the fen rights thereto, and the sum of £9,000 in the funds, if she shall be married within 12 months of my death, and if she shall not be so married, then the whole to my nephew Osric Ward absolutely. And I appoint his Grace the Duke of Verrily sole executor and trustee of this my will, with power, in his absolute discretion, to enlarge the said term of 12 months. The attorney lowered the paper. Somebody's teacup rattled. Verily, said Osric Ward, and turned round and saw the Duke standing by the door. I beg your pardon, your Grace. I did not, that is, forgive me, but why in the world would my aunt name you? You never called here. In 11 years you never once called at this house. No, said Hollis. I never did. 12 months from the 9th of March, said Osric, recovering fast. And my cousin is 25 and has been on the shelf since she was 19, and I mean that with the greatest possible affection. Your Grace has a discretion to enlarge the time. I make no doubt you will be sensible about it. Midsummer year, and the thing goes where it was always going to go. Mr. Ward, said Cecily, you have been in this house since 11 this morning, and you have not once asked whether I want the house. Do you want it? I want the fen, she said. Miss Ward, why did she name me? I have no idea. She looked up at him then, directly, and her eyes were grey and entirely steady. I hoped you would know. She was a great one for arrangements. She arranged the parish, she arranged the drainage commissioners, she arranged the curate's marriage, and she has plainly arranged something now, and she has died before explaining it, which she will have thought excellent management. Then let me say the plain thing, said Hollis. You have 12 months to marry a man you have not got, or lose this house. Yes, you might go elsewhere, with £9,000. There is no £9,000 unless I marry your Grace. Do keep up. She said it without heat, and there is nowhere else. That is not self-pity, it is joinery. Look at the doorway you are standing in. It is 4 inches wider than the one in the passage, because my aunt had it taken out and rebuilt. The step at the garden door is gone. There is a gravel slope instead, laid to a fall of 1 in 12, which is the steepest I can manage with a stick in the wet. The bureau is low. The bell is low. There is a bench at the halfway point of the walk down to the water, because 5 years ago we found out, she and I, exactly how far I can go without one. This is not a house I am fond of, said Cecily Ward. It is the only house in England that has been altered until I can live in it. without asking a single person for anything. My cousin will sell it before Michaelmas. And Bet is 59, and the two old men in the yard have their annuities charged on this estate, and Osric has already asked Mr. Truscott whether annuities can be bought out. So no, I cannot simply go. There is a year, and there is a fen, and there is a condition I cannot possibly perform, and now there is you. £700, said Hollis. 740 with the interest to Lady Day, said Cecily Ward. It is in my aunt's private ledger, which is the small book with the green spine, and every advance is entered on the day it was made, in her hand until her eyes failed, and in mine after that, and every one of them is signed for by Mr. Osric Ward at the bottom of the page. Truscott turned the pages with the reverence of an attorney who has been handed a gift. Osric Ward, when it was put to him in that same parlour 4 days later, went through several colours and settled on outrage. That is a private matter between my aunt and myself. It was, said Hollis. She is dead. It is now a debt owing to her estate, and I am her executor, and I am obliged to call it in. I am sorry, it is not a discretion. It is a duty. You may enlarge a term of 12 months by your absolute discretion, but you cannot forbear £700. No, said Hollis, I cannot. And I suppose my cousin brought you the book. Your cousin, said Cecily, kept the book. There is a difference, and my aunt taught me it, and you have never once in your life understood it. He rode out to Bramble Wick 11 times that spring on the business of the estate, which was rather more often than the business of the estate required. He learned the house. He learned the gravel slope lay to 1 in 12, and the low bureau, and the bench at the halfway point of the walk. And he learned from Bet in the kitchen, over a cup of tea that he had not asked for and drank standing up like a boy, that Miss Cecily had been 19 when the carriage went over at Markford Turn, and that she had been 11 weeks on her back and had never once, in 6 years, said a single word about the man who had been driving. Does it pain her? He asked, and heard himself and wished it back. It pains her in the wet, and after the stairs, and worst at 4 in the morning, said Bet. And if your Grace is minded to ask her about it, ask her once, straight. And then never again, for she can bear anything on God's earth, except being asked how she is by people who have already decided what the answer ought to be. Osric had a surveyor on the fen by the end of April, a man with a level and 2 rods, walking the sedge at Hethermere and putting pegs in. He is measuring for a drain, said Cecily from the bench at the halfway point, with her crutch across her knees and a tin box of specimens open beside her. He cannot cut it while I have the fen rights, and I have them until midsummer next year, and after that he will cut it in a fortnight. He means to take the water off 1,100 acres. It would make 1,100 acres of indifferent barley, she said, and it would put an end to the only station in England of 4 plants I could name, and to the sedge cutting that 11 families in this parish live by between November and March, and to the fowling, and to the peat. Provement is a word that means. The person saying it will be better off. I have been counting them for 6 years, said Cecily Ward. Come and look at the sheets, if you have an hour and no manners about a lady's press. The herbarium was in the north room. 1,140 sheets in 12 boxes, each specimen laid out with a beauty that stopped him at the door. The station, the soil, the date, the height of the water that year, and in the corner of every sheet, in a small precise upright hand, the same 2 initials, C.W. You publish, he said at last. I contribute. The Transactions of the Martford Philosophical Society will not print a paper by a woman, they will print one by C. Ward of Bramble Wick, and they have printed 9. And 2 of them were read aloud at the annual meeting by a gentleman who has never in his life set foot in a fen in February. She closed a box. My aunt carried the letters to the post at Markford herself for 6 years, and brought the answers back, and never once asked me what was in them. She said that a correspondence is a private house and one does not walk into it. Hollis Grantham rode home to Verrily that evening in the long light, and went without taking off his coat, to the library, and pulled down the county transactions for 11 years and laid them open on the table one after another. C. Ward, on the floor of Hethermere Fen. C. Ward on the water levels of the peat. C. Ward on the sedge and its cutting, cited 9 times, cited by him in his own paper on the drainage of the eastern levels, with the words "the careful observations of Mr. C. Ward." He sat down in the dark without a candle. He could not work out how a woman that county had spent 6 years calling unmarriageable had come to be the only authority he trusted on 1,100 acres of water and sedge, nor why the small, precise, upright hand on those specimen sheets had made the back of his neck go cold. As though he had seen it somewhere often and recently, and could not for the life of him think where. "May I give you my arm down the slope?" "No, thank you." "May I carry the box?" "Yes," said Cecily. "And you may not do it kindly. Carry it as though I had asked you to carry a box." On the water she was quicker than he was. She kept a flat-bottomed fen boat at the stayther with a quant pole cut down to her height, and she went out in it alone twice a week. And the first time he went with her he discovered that a woman who cannot walk half a mile can pole 1,100 acres of fen in an afternoon, and that she knew every dike, gout and drove in it by name. He talked to her more that summer than he had talked to anybody in 11 years, which he told her, and she said that she found it very unlikely, and he said that it was perfectly true. "I cannot do rooms," he said. "I never could. My father could walk into an assembly and be liked in 90 seconds. I walk in and count the doors. I have 400 correspondents and I write 11 letters a day, and I have friendships of 15 years standing with men I would not know in the street, and I am aware of how that sounds." "It sounds," said Cecily, "like a man describing my life to me as though I should be shocked by it. You do not think it a poor substitute." "I think it is not a substitute at all," she said. "It is the thing itself, done at a distance. A correspondence is the only place where nobody has yet decided what you look like." She never softened. That was what undid him in the end, not any warmth, but the absolute steadiness of her attention. She listened to him the way she counted plants, and she did not flatter him once in 9 months, and when in September he said something foolish about the sedge cutters, she took him apart in 4 sentences, and then poled him home in silence and gave him tea. "You are very hard on me," he said. "You are the executor of a will that decides whether I have a roof at midsummer," said Cecily Ward, "and I have watched what 6 years of being pitied does to the way a person is spoken to. I will not be soft with you. I have nothing else to hold with." The petition was filed in the last week of November. Truscott brought it out to Bramblewick himself and would not sit down. "It is your cousin, madam. Mr. Osric Ward has petitioned that a commission issue to inquire into your capacity to manage your own affairs, and that a receiver be appointed in the meantime of the rents of Bramblewick." "On what ground?" "On the ground," said Truscott with distaste, "of infirmity of body, seclusion from society, and I am obliged to read it, the peculiar habits of a single lady of 25 who is stated to spend her days alone upon a fen collecting weeds. He is entirely serious, your grace, and worse, he is not certain to fail. Half the commissioners are landowners with an interest in drainage, and every one of them has heard the county's opinion of Miss Ward for 6 years. It is a great deal easier to persuade 12 men that a woman who does not go out is unable than to persuade them that they have never once invited her, and the £740 is precisely why he has done it. If a receiver is appointed he need not pay it this year, and if the commission finds against her he need not pay it at all, for the whole estate falls to him at midsummer in any event. When is it heard?" "The commissioners sit at the assembly rooms at Markford," said Truscott, "on the 4th of March. 5 days, he said. Miss Ward's 12 months expire on the 9th. Afterwards, in the passage, with the door shut, Hollis Grantham did the thing that he would spend the rest of the winter not thinking about. Truscott, she is not to be troubled with the detail of this. The affidavits, the interrogatories, the medical men, I will not have that carried into that parlour a sheet at a time for 3 months. Handle it through me. Let her work. Your Grace, she is the respondent. She has a right. She has a right to a winter without a pack of attorneys measuring her doorways, said Hollis. I am her trustee. Do it through me. And Truscott, who was a good man and had been an attorney for 40 years and knew exactly what a court makes of a woman who does not appear, said, "Very well, your grace," and went home and did as he was told. Cecily was at the window when Hollis came back in, with the tin box open and 11 sedge heads laid out on a sheet of paper in order of size. "The 4th of March, she said, without looking up. "It is a Thursday." Bet looked it out in the almanac. "You are very calm." "I have had 6 years of practice at being talked about in rooms I am not in," said Cecily Ward. "This is only the first time the room will have a clerk in it." "Read it again," said Cecily. "The middle part, where you are wrong. I am not wrong about the peat." "You are wrong about the peat in the 3rd line, and you know it, because you have read my paper and you have quoted my paper, and you have quoted it correctly, which is more than the gentleman who read it aloud managed." It was the 11th of January, and the fen was frozen from the Staithe to Hethermer, and they were in the north room with the boxes and 1 lamp. And Hollis Grantham had his own paper on the drainage of the eastern levels open in front of him and a pencil in his hand, and had been happier for 2 hours than he could account for. "Very well. I am wrong about the peat. Write it down. Men never remember these occasions." He wrote it down. She laughed not much, but it was the first time, and he heard it, and he put the pencil down and did not trust himself to look up for a moment. "Miss Ward," he said, "I have been coming to this house since March. In 11 years I have not once been anywhere I would rather be than in a cold room with 1100 sheets of dried plants and a woman who tells me I am wrong about peat." "Then you should say that to me in March," said Cecily, "when you are not my trustee and I am not a condition in a will." "March is the 4th and the 9th. I am aware of the dates, your grace." What he did instead was to drive to Martford on the 2nd of February and instruct Truscott to draw a marriage settlement. It was a handsome one. Bramblewick settled on her absolutely. The annuities of Bet and the 2 old men secured for their lives, the fen rights reserved from any drainage scheme in perpetuity, 400 a year to her separate use, and the £9,000 tied so tightly that no husband on earth could touch a farthing of it. He was proud of it. That was the thing he could hardly bear to remember afterwards. He had sat in an attorney's office for 3 hours being proud of how thoroughly he had protected her, and it never once occurred to him to ask her what she wanted in it. He proposed on the 10th of February, in the parlour at Bramblewick, with the engrossed settlement on the table between them and a fire going and the light off the snow coming in white at the window. "You have 12 months and they end on the 9th of March, he said. "I have looked at it from every side. I cannot enlarge the term. A trustee may not use a discretion to defeat the plain object of the will, and any court would say I had done it for my own convenience. So there is one road, and this is it. Marry me. The settlement is drawn. Bramblewick is yours absolutely. The annuities are safe. The fen cannot be drained while either of us lives. And Osric is finished. His petition falls the moment you are a duchess. And Cecily," and here he tried to be gentle, and used, as gentlemen do, the sentence he had been carrying about with him for a fortnight, as though it were a kindness. "You must see that no one else will offer." She did not answer at once. She reached across the table, turned the settlement round and read it, not the terms. He saw her eyes go to the foot of the last sheet, where the engrossing clerk had set the date. "The 2nd of February, she said. "Yes. You had it drawn on the 2nd. "You asked me on the 10th. She set it down and squared it with the edge of the table, exactly as she had squared the green ledger. "So for 8 days there was a paper in Markford with my name in it, and my house in it, and my fen in it, and my £9,000 in it, and I was the last person in the county to see it. Do you know what my aunt called that? Management. She was proud of it. It was the worst thing about her. I was trying to spare you." She took a folded sheet out of the bureau, a copy of Osric's counsel's brief, sent to her by an old clerk of Truscott's who had thought, in his simple decent way, that a lady ought to see what was said of her. "The respondent has not appeared in person, has filed no affidavit, has been throughout represented and answered for by her trustee, His Grace the Duke of Verrily, which the petitioner submits is the plainest evidence of the seclusion and incapacity complained of." She looked up. "You told Truscott to keep it from me, to let me work. You did it out of kindness, and you did it without asking. And every week that I was not troubled with it, my cousin was building his case out of my silence. They will stand up on the 4th of March and say, "She does not even speak for herself. Her affairs are conducted by a duke." "You gave them that," said Cecily. "And then you brought me a paper you drew 8 days ago and told me that no one else will offer." "Cecily, I meant that I love you." "I know what you meant," she said, and for the first time her voice was not steady. "That is the whole of it, Your Grace. You meant that you love me, and you said that nobody would have me." Those 2 sentences came out of the same man on the same afternoon, and I shall be 35 and still be taking them apart at 4 in the morning. What she did in 3 days and told nobody but Bet. On the 13th of February she wrote to Truscott revoking every authority he held from her, entering her own appearance as respondent to the petition, and requiring that all papers be sent to her at Bramble Wick and to no other person. And on the 14th she executed a deed by it. Cecily Ward renounced, absolutely and irrevocably, every claim to the house and lands of Bramble Wick and to the £9,000 in the funds, whether upon the condition in her aunt's will or otherwise, so that at midsummer, married or single, the whole should go to Osric Ward, and no man living could say that she had married for a house or fought for one, or that a duke had bought her out of a court. She sent a copy to Truscott, and a copy to her cousin's attorney, and none at all to Verrily. "He'll hear of it inside a week," said Bet at the door, crying. "Then he will hear of it," said Cecily, "the way I heard of the settlement." "Your Grace has no standing here," the clerk said, in the passage of the Assembly Rooms at Markford, on the morning of the 4th of March. "The respondent has revoked all authority. She appears in person. I am directed to say that if you attempt to address the commissioners, she will withdraw." "Where may I sit?" "At the back, Your Grace, with the county." He sat at the back with the county. Cecily Ward came in at 10 with Bet behind her and a japanned box under her arm, and she crossed the whole length of that room on her crutch, unhurried, while 90 people watched her do it, and nobody offered her an arm because she had sent word ahead that nobody was to. It took her 41 seconds. Hollis counted them and did not blink, and the back of his throat ached for an hour afterwards. Counsel for the petitioner opened. It took him 50 minutes to say that Miss Cecily Ward was a single lady of 25, gravely infirm, who lived alone in a fen parish, went into no society, refused invitations, spent her days upon the water gathering weeds, and whose affairs had for a 12-month been answered for entirely by another person. He said it kindly. He said it as though it grieved him. It was the kindness that made it dangerous. Then Cecily rose. She stood. She did not have to. And she did, with her hand on the crutch and the box on the table beside her. "Gentlemen, I shall not be long, and I shall not be pathetic, and I would take it as a courtesy if nobody says the word poor. First, the invitations. I have been asked to 11 houses in 6 years. I have refused none of them. I have accepted 4 and been carried up 2 flights of stairs at one of them by 2 footmen in front of 40 people. And I did not go back, and no house in this county has ever once thought to tell me whether their door has a step. I am not secluded, gentlemen. I am unaccommodated. They are different words, and the difference is joinery, not medicine. Second, the weeds. She opened the box. The transactions of this county's own philosophical society, 11 years, 9 papers by C. Ward of Bramble Wick, upon the flora and the water levels of Hethermere Fen. 2 of them were read aloud in this very room at the annual meeting. Some of you applauded. C. Ward is at present standing in front of you asking whether she can manage her own affairs. Third, the affairs. She laid them out one at a time, and her voice did not vary. My aunt's household accounts for 4 years in my hand, audited to the farthing. The rent book, the tithe receipts, 11 years of correspondence, 406 letters in, 440 out, indexed. And this. She set the last paper on the table. A deed executed on the 14th of February, by which I renounced Bramble Wick, the fen and the £9,000 absolutely, in favour of my cousin, 3 weeks before this hearing. Gentlemen, the estate my cousin says I am incapable of managing is already his. I gave it to him. I am asking you to declare a pauper competent. There remains the last matter, said Cecily, and it is the only one that has any weight in it, so I shall not slide past it. It is true that for 4 months of this business I did not appear and did not answer, and that everything was done through my trustee. That is a fact, and my cousin is entitled to it. I will say only this about it. It was not done to conceal me. It was done to spare me by a man who did not ask whether I wished to be spared. I have found that a great many people in my life have decided what I could bear without inquiring, and that the kind ones do quite as much damage as the unkind, and rather more of it, because nobody will let you be angry with them. I am here now. I have been here since 10 o'clock. I have answered every question, and I have brought every book. If you find me incapable, gentlemen, you will do it to my face, and I shall have made you look at me while you did. Then Mr. Truscott stood up at the side with an old sealed packet in his hand and his spectacles pushed up on his forehead, and he was Hollis sore, shaking slightly. Sirs, I have a paper. It was deposited with the will of the late Miss Prudence Ward and endorsed by her in her own hand, to be opened by the commissioners, or by any court, or by the Duke of Verrily, whichever first has occasion to ask why I named him. Until this morning nobody had occasion. Counsel has now asked it 4 times. Read it, said the senior commissioner. Truscott broke the seal. I name Verrily because for 6 years I have carried my niece's letters to Martford post with my own hands, and brought his answers back in my basket, and never once looked inside either. In the autumn 6 years ago a gentleman began to write to C, Ward of Bramblewick, upon the water levels of Hethermere. He sent seeds, he sent books, he sent the proofs of his own papers to be corrected, and they came back corrected, and he printed the corrections. He has written, by my count, some 400 letters, and he signs himself V and nothing else, in 11 years. That gentleman is the Duke of Verrily. He believes he is writing to a man. My niece believes she is writing to a scholar who does not know what she looks like, and she has told me that it is the only place in the world where nobody has decided about her in advance, and I have not had the heart to spoil it. And now I am 81 and I have run out of time to be delicate. As to the condition of 12 months, it is a fraud, and I hope to be forgiven it. I have given my trustee an absolute discretion to enlarge it. My direction to him, which binds his conscience, whatever it does at law, is that he shall enlarge the term by 99 years upon my niece's asking, and that he is to be told so only when he has stopped being able to pretend he comes to that house on business. I put the condition in for one reason. There is a silent man in this county who will write to anybody and call upon nobody, and I meant to make him walk in at my door. 90 people turned round all at once, and looked at the back of the room. Cecily Ward did not turn round at all. She stood quite still with her hand on the crutch and her eyes on the table, and Hollis, from the back, watched the colour go out of her face and then come back into it, and understood that she had just found out, in a public room in front of the county, that the only privacy she had ever had in her life had belonged to him. The petition is dismissed, said the senior commissioner, and it is dismissed with costs, and I will add something that is not required of me. Miss Ward, this county has been told for 6 years what you are, and it has believed it, and I have sat at a dinner table and heard it said, and I did not contradict it. You have this morning conducted your own case, produced your own accounts, corrected my arithmetic on the water levels, and proved that you gave away £9,000 3 weeks before we could accuse you of wanting it. There is no man in this room I would trust with my affairs sooner. The finding is that you are of entirely sound mind and full capacity, and the clerk will write it in those words. Osric Ward paid the costs. He paid in the same month the £740 because the trustee called it in and would not be moved, and by midsummer, being unable to carry Bramblewick and a corn debt at Markford together, he had put the house in the hands of an auctioneer and taken his wife to Boulogne. The Marchford Philosophical Society held its annual meeting in the Assembly Rooms on the 11th of May, in the same long room, with the same county in it. The Duke of Verrily took the chair, which he had held for 4 years and had never once used for anything but reading out other men's work. The first paper, he said, is upon the water levels of Hethermere Fen and the Sedge, and it is by C. Ward of Bramblewick, who has now given this society 9 papers in 11 years, and whom several gentlemen in this room have cited in print, and one of whom is myself, twice. C. Ward is Miss Cecily Ward, and she is in the 3rd row, and she is going to read it herself. and I will ask the room to hear her out and to save its opinion of the propriety of the thing for the street afterwards, where I shall be delighted to discuss it with anybody. In February I asked Miss Ward to marry me. I had the settlement drawn on the 2nd and I asked her on the 10th, so that for 8 days there existed in this town a paper disposing of her house, her fen and her fortune which she had not seen. I told her that the marriage answered a condition in a will, and I told her I would like the words said out loud in the room, where they have been thought for 6 years, that no one else would offer. I was in love with her, and I said the other thing instead, because saying the other thing let me be useful and saying the true thing would have let her refuse me. There is one more thing, and it is the worst, and she found it out in this room in front of 90 people, which is not how a person should learn anything. For 6 years I have corresponded with a scholar I never met, who signed C.W., and I believed I was writing to a man, and I wrote things in those letters I have never said aloud to anybody. She believed she was writing to a stranger who did not know what she looked like, and she has told me that it was the only place in the world where nobody had decided about her in advance. I have withdrawn my proposal. I withdraw it again here in front of you, so that nobody can say she was pressed. I shall not renew it. If Miss Ward ever wishes it renewed, she knows perfectly well how to write to me, and I shall be at home, as I have been for 11 years, answering the post. He sat down. Cecily Ward read her paper. It took 35 minutes. There were 9 questions afterwards, and she answered all of them, and one gentleman who had applauded her work in that room 3 years earlier, believing it to be a man's, stood up and said so, and apologized and sat down very red. She did not write to him in May. She did not write in June. On the 2nd of July, Verrily's letters came in at 9, as they always did, and among them was one in a small, precise, upright hand, which the Duke of Verrily had been reading twice a week for 6 years, and had never once recognized for what it was. Sir, I have this morning been informed that Bramblewick is to be sold at Michaelmas, and I find that I have opinions about the disposal of a house I no longer own, which is precisely the sort of impertinence you have been encouraging in me by post since I was 19. Come on Thursday. Come on business, if it is easier. You have been coming on business for 1.5 years, and neither of us has believed it since June. C.W., he wrote back the same hour, and for the first time in 11 years he signed his whole name, which took him 3 attempts. They settled it on the bench at the halfway point of the walk, which is where they settled most things afterwards. I will not be bought a house, said Cecily. No. Here is what I propose, and you will tell me where it is wrong. He had it written out, and he handed it to her before he said a word of it, which he was rather proud of. I buy Bramblewick at the sale at auction, like anybody. And on the same day you take a lease of it from me, for your life, at £11 a year, which you will pay me every Lady Day out of your own money, and I shall bank it. And if I am ever a day late in a repair, you may sue me in the county court, and I shall be delighted. And the fen? Conveyed to 5 trustees for the parish, none of them me, none of them you, with the sedge cutting and the fouling and the peat secured for ever, and the drainage rights extinguished. Your paper is annexed to the deed as the schedule. Your name is on it. I could not make the attorney put C. Ward. He said it was not a legal description. Cecily Ward read it through twice. And the settlement? Not drawn, said Hollis. There is not a line of it in existence. I have made an appointment with Truscott for Tuesday, and there are 2 chairs in front of his desk. You will strike out whatever you like, and I have told him to expect it. She struck out 2 clauses on the Tuesday, and added one of her own, and Truscott said it was the most disagreeable morning of his professional life, and asked whether they might do in for the fen conveyance. They were married at the parish church in October, in the fen wind, and there were 14 people, and Bet cried from the beginning of the service to the end of it, and was not sorry. Her hip did not mend. It never was going to. She had said so plainly to him in the north room a year before, and he had never once since asked her how she was in the way that requires a particular answer. There are bad days. On the bad days she works at the low table in the south window at Verrily with the boxes round her and a fire, and nobody in that house apologizes for it, least of all her. The ramp at the Verrily garden door was laid, at his direction, at 1 and 8. She looked at it for some time, leaning on the crutch, in perfect silence, and then said, "Take it up and do it again." And he did, and it is 1 in 12 now, and the mason has never got over it. They still write to one another. She is at Herkimer 3 days a week between March and October, and he sends the post out after her by the boy, and the letters go across the county and back for the sake of 4 lines about the water level, and they are signed, both of them, with their whole names.